So yeah, I need to talk through something that has been making me really uncomfortable with myself. And this is for my chronically online leftists, but also for staunch Republicans, for pro-life Christians, queer activists, MAGA Trump supporters, people with strong convictions about sex and gender, people fluent in the language of liberation, and it's for people who roll their eyes at that language entirely. Like, if you're trying to figure out how the hell we're supposed to live alongside people who see the world completely differently than we do, and maybe even figure out or try to figure out how we can turn this nightmare we found ourselves in around, I hope you'll hear me out. Not because I have the answers, I actually don't know the answer, but I think I and some of the people and spaces I resonate with have been part of the problem. You know, I care fiercely about human rights, queer, trans, and indigenous liberation, the dignity of people pushed to the margins, the dignity of all people. None of that has changed. What I've been interrogating, however, is how I hold and express those values. Recently, I watched this piece of political satire absolutely dragging some of the ways the far left talks about identity, gender, language, and disagreement. And my immediate reaction was probably the intended reaction. Okay, this comparison is intellectually unfair, incredibly problematic, and I can absolutely explain why. And then I realized how fucking ironic it would be to respond to satire about self-righteous leftists by pulling out all my sociological jargon in the comments and going, well, actually, according to my theoretical framework, blah, blah, blah. Like, dude, you are literally doing the thing. So instead of immediately defending myself, I sat with why it bothered me, and I actually thanked the creator in the comments for getting me to think. And I realized that I recognized myself in some of the behaviors that the creator was highlighting. The certainty, the policing of language, the expectation that people should already understand concepts that took me years of education, lived experience, and personal growth to understand. Hearing someone say something questionable and immediately deciding what kind of person they are. Assuming that if someone doesn't understand my worldview, they just haven't done the work. Turning disagreements into moral emergencies. Turning disagreements into relationship-ending dilemmas. Turning daily interactions into interventions. And this became particularly uncomfortable for me to sit with because I grew up in Christian nationalism. You know, I believed a relationship with Jesus Christ was the only path to salvation and wholeness. I believed I was inherently sinful, especially as a gay person. And I believed my duty on earth was to spread the gospel, lead worship, and make disciples. I've spent the last decade deconstructing that worldview, peeling it apart layer by layer. A worldview where you could start with one premise: the Bible is the infallible word of God, and build an entire moral universe on top of it. Someone asks, why is XYZ wrong? Why is this wrong? I would say, because the Bible says so. Okay, but what if I don't accept the Bible as an infallible authority? Eventually, my argument bottomed out at, well, the Bible, which is indisputably true, says you're wrong. Okay, but you just returned to the premise I told you I don't accept. And eventually I might say, well, these are my beliefs and I'm not going to argue with you. Just know that you are made in the image of God, Jesus loves you, and you're going to be miserable in sin until you accept him as your savior, or something like that. Insert whatever moral or political issue you want. The structure of that argument was basically always the same. History, sociology, someone's lived experience, none of it mattered if it contradicted the framework I had already decided was true. I was right, and I didn't know any better, truly. But because of this, disagreement became something much bigger than just disagreement. You weren't just incorrect, right? You were sinful, deceived, worldly, rebellious, morally corrupt, compromised. Once I got out, I became really good at recognizing that kind of reasoning from the outside because I used to be on the inside making those arguments. But here's the question I apparently haven't asked myself enough. Did some of the social habits and some of the faulty reasoning that I learned in that world survive in me after my departure from it? Because, you know, human beings can reproduce similar behaviors inside radically different belief systems. I've experienced versions of this elsewhere too, not just in the church. I spent 4 years deeply involved in the vegan movement, for example. Something I joined because I genuinely cared about reducing suffering could sometimes turn into purity testing, policing people's choices, and feeling morally superior to people who didn't share our framework, which Looking back is kind of the fucking point I'm making here. It's an issue. I guess, I guess I have an affinity for cult-like thinking, which, jokes aside, might actually be why I'm able to recognize some of these patterns in myself. I've watched myself repeatedly find belonging in communities organized around strong moral convictions. And I know how intoxicating it can feel to believe that you and your people have figured out the right way to live. And before somebody loses their mind, no, I am not saying Christian nationalism, veganism, and leftism are morally or politically equivalent. Obviously. I'm talking about people, because we as people like certainty. We like belonging. We crave it. We like knowing who gets it and who doesn't, because that makes us feel safe and validated in what we believe to be true. We like knowing who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. Complexity is uncomfortable, while binaries are easy. They tell us who belongs, who doesn't, who's right, and who's wrong. And somehow, conveniently, we always end up on the side of the good guys. I find that psychologically fascinating. Like, what are the fucking odds that out of all the competing worldviews on planet Earth, my group, and as I've mentioned, I've belonged to quite a few, just happens to be the one that figured everything out. If I'm not careful, believing that I'm fighting for something good can become evidence in my own mind that the way I'm fighting for it must also be good. But those are two completely different questions. Do I believe I'm fighting for something good, and is the way I'm defending that belief also good? Because I can correctly identify an injustice and still be unfair to an individual person. I can advocate for marginalized people and still enjoy, in some kind of sick, twisted, but very human way, feeling morally superior to somebody else. I can understand systems of power and still use that knowledge to exert social power over somebody else. And I can be completely right about something and still be an asshole about being right. You know, I think we'd all like to think that we're kind, wise, and understanding people. But maybe I can be an asshole. Maybe I have historically been an asshole sometimes while defending the things that matter most to me. So I've really been sitting with this, especially around queer and trans issues, because that's what the satire was primarily about. And these are issues I really care about, so let me be really clear. Trans people deserve dignity, safety, healthcare, housing, employment, love, community, and the freedom to exist without constantly being treated as a political problem. And something else can also be true. If somebody struggles with the statement, trans women are women, that disagreement, or even their difficulty making sense of the claim, does not by itself tell me everything I need to know about that person's moral character. Also, who am I to judge someone's moral character? Maybe this person understands gender completely differently than I do. Maybe their framework is almost entirely biological. Maybe it's religious. Maybe nobody has ever explained the distinction between sex and gender to them in a way that actually made sense to them. I wasn't exposed to those distinctions until I was sitting in an introduction to sociology class at the University of Colorado Boulder in 2015. So maybe this person is genuinely trying to understand and they just don't. Maybe there's fear or prejudice underneath their reaction. Maybe several of those things can be true at once. And maybe they're just wrong. And yeah, maybe I actually listen to them and eventually conclude, nah, dude, like, this is super hateful and not okay. But I want to arrive at that conclusion because I actually listened to the human being in front of me. Not because I recognized the vocabulary of an ideological opponent, whether they're standing in front of me or on Instagram or TikTok, and decided that I knew everything I needed to know about their character, went straight to the comments, liked whichever responses most effectively stuck it to them, called them a TERF, and hit unfollow or block. At that point, I haven't understood anybody. I've just sorted them into a category and moved on. Y'all, I know what it's like to believe something so deeply that you genuinely cannot understand how another intelligent person could reject it. I've lived that, and I also know what it's like to fundamentally reconsider those beliefs later. So, shouldn't my history make me more curious about people, not less? And shouldn't being a therapist in training, where so much of my job is literally to stay curious, challenge me to practice some of that curiosity outside of the clinical space too? Empathy is not agreement. Curiosity is not endorsement. Understanding why somebody believes something does not require me to accept it. And refusing to constantly condemn someone doesn't mean refusing to confront actual injustice. It means maybe, before I agree with my brain's automatic categorization of somebody, I ask, what do you actually mean? Why do you believe that? What happened in your life that brought you here? Are you afraid, confused, misinformed? Are we operating from completely different definitions? Are you speaking from a place of pain? And then there's an even bigger question. Am I actually helping this person understand me and a position I sincerely believe is just and right? Or am I perpetuating division while performing my politics for people who already agree with me? And online, am I feeding an algorithm information that further traps me inside a worldview bubble where everybody sounds more and more like me, and I'm just getting fed it over and over again? Because social media is built for performance, and it makes moral certainty so fucking easy. Someone says X. X sounds like political position Y. People who believe Y are Z. Therefore, this person is Z. Z being racist, transphobe, TERF, fascist, Zionist, woke, groomer, communist, bigot. Pick whatever vocabulary your corner of the internet prefers to use to other the other. Some of those labels describe real ideologies, prejudices, systems, and behaviors. Fascists exist, racists exist, transphobia exists, so does white supremacy, so does communism. Zionism is a real political ideology. I'm not arguing that words don't mean anything. I'm asking, what happens when a descriptive word becomes a shortcut that lets me stop being curious about the individual human being in front of me? A label can describe something real and still become a weapon when I use it to stop having to understand somebody. And I do not want to contribute to making this society more divided than it already is. I am fucking exhausted by it all. We are living through real violence, injustice, political extremism, economic inequality, and profound human suffering. And I want my life and my work as a human rights practitioner, therapist, artist, and just one person sharing this planet with 8 billion other people to contribute toward healing some tiny part of it. My clinical training definitely shapes how I think about all of this. If I'm sitting across from a client whose beliefs about something like Israel and Palestine deeply conflict with my own, my job is not to hear one political label and decide I understand that person. My job is to get curious about the human being sitting in front of me. What experiences, relationships, fears, values, faith, history, or pain brought them to their conclusions? Obviously, not everyone is a therapist. And nobody should approach every political interaction like a freaking clinical session. Please don't do that. But I do think there's something worth carrying outside of the therapy room. Moving past our first assumptions long enough to actually understand someone creates possibilities for relationship, understanding, and even changing hearts and minds that categorizing or attacking them rarely, if ever, does. So increasingly, I believe this. We are not going to shame each other into liberation. We cannot insult each other into curiosity, and we cannot humiliate each other into empathy. I don't think we're getting anywhere by screaming our respective moral frameworks and generalizations at each other from opposite sides of an algorithm. And this next part that I'm going to share with you all might make some of my people, folks I'm aligned with, people deeply committed to equity and liberation, really fucking uncomfortable. I mean, I'm uncomfortable unpacking it publicly here now, but taking a magnifying glass to this social shit show has forced me to notice how casually violent and dehumanizing some of our language has become, definitely including mine. Things like, Zionists should put a gun in their mouths and pull the trigger. I literally, kid you not, saw that on Threads this morning and did a double take. Not just because of what this person wrote, but because I stopped to consider why they felt it necessary to write those words at all. And there was so much support for it in the comments. Honestly, before all of this reflection, before I wrote this all down, I might have just hearted the post and kept scrolling because I understand the anger underneath it. I feel it deeply too. But the post, my hearting it, people commenting in radical support of Zionists dying by suicide, and then all of us moving on, what does any of that actually accomplish? What do those words accomplish? Or still, from my side of things, fuck Trump supporters. They're the worst kinds of people that exist. Colonizers deserve what they get. I can't wait until all the boomers are dead. I hate men. All of them are garbage. If you don't believe trans women are women, you're a transphobe. It's not trans people's job to educate you. Do the fucking work, you TERF. And even something like, well, especially something like ACAB. I understand the structural argument behind that slogan, and so does my community. I don't need to explain to the people around me why I might say it at the sight of a police officer, or why, for me, it captures much larger critiques of power, policing, and institutional and systemic racism. But maybe that's part of what I'm trying to interrogate here. When everyone around me already understands and shares the premises underneath my language, I'm rarely asked to explain them. I'm rarely challenged. Nobody necessarily challenges the generalization because we already agree about what it represents. And there's a lot of comfort in that. But there's also a risk. When my beliefs are constantly being reinforced by the people around me, I can stop examining the assumptions underneath them and stop examining what my language is actually doing. So in this moment, I have to ask myself, am I using ACAB to critique an institution and the systems surrounding policing? Or has it sometimes become permission for me to see the uniform before I see the person? To stop seeing individual police officers as complicated human beings deserving of the same curiosity, context, and complexity I instinctively allow myself and the people I agree with? Sometimes for me, it has been the latter. And I think that's one of the dangers of ideological bubbles. We contextualize ourselves and the people we agree with, and we categorize everyone else. I've done versions of this elsewhere too. For example, during the racial reckoning in 2020, I remember essentially telling people, and maybe not even essentially, verbatim telling people, I don't have to explain my blackness to you. If you can't see white supremacy operating around you and how you're contributing to it, then you're participating in racism. If you're not actively anti-racist, you're a racist. And look, I still believe racism and white supremacy are real. I still believe neutrality can preserve and does preserve unjust systems. What I'm interrogating here is the leap I sometimes made from analyzing a system to believing I completely understood an individual person living inside of it. Because telling somebody, educate yourself, refusing to engage with them, and then morally condemning them for not already understanding the framework I'm refusing to explain is kind of an impossible fucking conversation, isn't it? Nobody owes me an explanation of their identity or lived experience. Marginalized people certainly are not obligated to turn every encounter into a frickin' seminar. But you don't owe someone an explanation, and therefore anyone who doesn't already understand is morally corrupt, are not the same claim. And I understand that none of these statements emerge from nowhere. There is history underneath them. There is anger, sometimes trauma, oppression, very real experiences of violence and injustice. But when did making sweeping statements about entire categories of human beings become something we excuse when our own ideology provides the explanation for the anger? And if I'm asking people to understand the complexity and context underneath my side's anger, why wouldn't I offer some of that same interpretive generosity in reverse? Because I started looking at rhetoric coming from the other direction too, and I do not have to make examples up. Trump has referred to people on the radical left as vermin. He's called political opponents the enemy from within, and suggested the National Guard or even the military could potentially be used against them. He's described Democrats as evil. And after the 2024 election, Wired documented far-right online spaces where people were openly calling for political opponents to be hanged or executed. One person described perceived traitors as a terminal cancer that needed to be eradicated. And then there's the rhetoric I've heard and y'all have heard for years. Democrats are baby killers. That language is fucking violent, and I want to extend the same question in that direction that I'm asking about my own community. What is underneath that? Fear? Religious conviction? A sincere belief that unborn children are being murdered? A belief that your country or your way of life is being destroyed or threatened? Does it stem from economic anxiety, anger, prejudice, propaganda? Maybe several of those things at once. Understanding where that rhetoric comes from doesn't make it true or make it okay. It does, however, help me understand how another human being got to a place where saying it felt justified. Different ideologies, different histories, different relationships to institutional power, but the same human capacity to turn fear, pain, anger, and moral certainty into contempt for entire groups of people. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being shocked by some of this. Sometimes I even participated in it from my side. I understood where the anger was coming from. I agreed with the injustices being named. I knew which side I was supposed to be on. That became enough for me to stop asking what the rhetoric itself was doing, what it was doing to me, to the people hearing it, and into the kind of political culture I was helping create. And look, I understand the rage. I understand, for example, why people witnessing what has happened to Palestinians are fucking furious. Palestinians have experienced decades of displacement, occupation, violence, and dehumanization, and the devastation in Gaza has been catastrophic. It is genocide. I also understand that entire traditions of liberation thought distinguish the violence of oppression from resistance to oppression, and that distinction really matters. A marginalized person, for example, saying something hateful about a dominant group does not suddenly acquire the institutional power of that group. The violence used to maintain oppression and the resistance of people living under that oppression cannot simply be flattened into some comfortable, both sides are equally bad equivalence. That's just not how power works. But I'm also interrogating something slightly different. I'm looking at what happens inside me when I become so convinced of another person's moral corruption that their suffering or even their death becomes acceptable, funny, or even necessary to me. Who do I become? What exactly am I liberating at that point? Because if the world that I'm fighting for is supposed to be more humane, I have to ask whether the way I'm fighting for it is actually practicing that humanity. And I don't believe meeting dehumanization with more dehumanization gets us there. And I'm not saying that the problem is the oppressed becomes the oppressor. That's not it. I'm saying something much narrower. We can oppose dehumanization while reproducing the logic of dehumanization. Telling an entire category of people to kill themselves is not dismantling a system. Celebrating someone's suffering because you've assigned them to the enemy category isn't redistributing power. Calling strangers demonic or evil isn't protecting anybody. And posting increasingly vicious rhetoric to an audience that already agrees with you may feel like political action because it's wrapped up in political language, but sometimes we're just throwing more hate into a vacuum already so hateful and violent that it is becoming debilitating to witness. I genuinely do not know how we get out of this polarized, violent, distrustful mess. But part of the answer has to involve being willing to interrogate our own side. So for me, with all of this in mind, this is where I'm at. I can hold strong convictions without constantly performing them. I can advocate without condescending. You know, my mom actually called me condescending the other day, and she's in the Christian Nationalist but anti-Trump camp. My intention isn't to condescend, but if that's how I'm coming across, I want to know. I want to know that. I can take that feedback as a charge to become more aware of the language and tone of my advocacy instead of immediately explaining away why she's wrong and why she misunderstood me. I can listen without surrendering my values. I can be corrected without becoming defensive. I can remain curious about people whose worldviews are radically different from mine. I can recognize injustice without assuming I possessed perfect knowledge. And listen, I know I'm fucking smart. I've worked hard to become a sociologically aware, culturally responsive, trauma-informed practitioner of human rights. I have a master's degree in human rights, and I have lived experiences that ground why I care so deeply about societal change. But you know what? And this is highly ironic because I know I've been talking for a lot. Sometimes I just need to shut the fuck up. And I can already hear some of my fellow leftists. Are you fucking kidding me? People are dying. The planet is burning. Racism, patriarchy, poverty, and systems of oppression are causing real harm every day. Bodily autonomy, LGBTQ+ rights, immigrant rights, women's rights, democracy, and the future of the planet are at stake here. And you're telling us to listen, to be quiet, to have some kumbaya moment with people actively causing harm? You know, I hear that, and I'm interrogating the part of me that feels that same anger and supports that argument. I get it, because when you believe people's lives and freedoms are being threatened, and don't get it twisted, I believe that they are, even listening to the other side can feel like complicity. Silence can feel unjustifiable. Resistance can feel morally necessary. But I can also hear what people on the right are saying. You believe unborn life is sacred, point blank. You believe biological sex is real and meaningful, point blank. You believe parents should have a say in what their children are taught in public schools. You believe faith and religious freedom deserve protection. You care about borders, about public safety, free speech, individual liberty, family, and your understanding of what America is supposed to be. And when you believe those things are being threatened, listening can feel like complicity. Silence can feel unjustifiable. Resistance can feel morally necessary. Obviously, we have radically different ideas about what is true, what is harmful, and what justice actually requires. I'm not pretending otherwise. Leftists have entire bodies of sociology, political theory, feminism, Marxism, critical theory, and social constructionism through which we understand these disagreements. People on the right also have their own moral, philosophical, religious, economic, and political frameworks. We all have reasons for believing what we believe. And shockingly, we all believe we're right. But listen to what exists underneath so much of our reaction. Something I hold sacred is under threat, and I have to protect it. That's so very human. Of course we're all angry. Of course we're all afraid. Of course it's hard to listen when listening feels like surrendering our values. But common ground doesn't need to begin with agreement, and it doesn't necessarily require any sort of compromise. Maybe it begins much smaller than that. Maybe it begins with recognizing that the person across from me, the person on the other side of the screen, may also be responding to something they sincerely believe is worth protecting. Something shaped by their family, faith, culture, education, experiences, fears, pain, and understanding of the world. That doesn't make every belief equally true just because someone sincerely believes it, nor does it make every action equally justifiable. And it absolutely does not mean I stop fighting injustice. I may profoundly disagree with you. I may fight like hell against what you believe. But moral conviction does not require dehumanization. I refuse to forget that you're human while I disagree with you. And I hope that you'll refuse to forget that about me too, because underneath all of this, leftist, conservative, Christian, atheist, queer, straight, Muslim, trans, cis, immigrant, MAGA, woke, rich, poor, underneath all the theories and identities and arguments and labels and comment sections and fucking TikToks. Y'all, we are these absolutely bizarre little conscious creatures living on a life-sustaining rock hurtling through space. We are orbiting one star among hundreds of billions, inside one galaxy among an incomprehensible number of galaxies in a universe that's been expanding for nearly 14 billion years. And somehow, for this impossibly brief moment, we're here together. So what the fuck are we doing? I don't ever want my politics to make me forget the humanity that those politics taught me to fight for. So I'm going to keep advocating. I'm going to keep speaking up like this. I'm going to keep speaking against the things I believe are preventing us from growing as a species across identities, cultures, political movements, and faith. And I'm going to keep interrogating my own certainties. And when I encounter something that genuinely challenges what I believe, like that satire video, I'm gonna try to remain open enough to actually hear it. That doesn't mean my beliefs will change. It doesn't mean I'll abandon science or what I've come to understand about power, privilege, and oppression. It does mean, though, I'm going to be more mindful of how I might be contributing to the problem I'm trying to solve. And most importantly, call me selfish, naive, privileged, whatever. I'm gonna try to take myself a little less fucking seriously while doing it, because it is a hard line to walk. Protecting my peace of mind while witnessing the horrors of the world in real time. But we're floating through the fucking cosmos, dude. For this tiny little window of cosmic time, again, somehow we get to be here together. So surely we can give each other and ourselves a little more grace, a little more patience, a little more curiosity, and a little more love. Because if we lose the ability to see a human being on the other side of our convictions, if we keep excavating this chasm between me and you, if our political vocabulary increasingly becomes fuck plus whatever category of human beings we've decided is beyond understanding, while mistaking that for political action, instead of actually organizing, voting, participating in local politics, caring for our communities, protecting vulnerable people, building relationships, and actually changing material conditions, what the fuck are we doing? When and where we have the privilege to choose a path that does not reproduce more dehumanization, I think we have to try, because otherwise, we are absolutely fucking cooked.